Sup Shredders, my name is Logan, aka Spiderhands, and welcome to an SP Reacts, where today we got ourselves a track from an act named Tour of 13, if I'm not mistaken, titled Fracture, the album mix. And if we switch over to here, I assume I've got the art up on the screen that, given this, the album may be called Foria, which is kind of cute cat though. We're gonna listen through this track from start till finish, and we're gonna hear what we think. I should also note that I'm going to be giving this song a score out of 10 based on various musical criteria at the end, but for now, let's go. Fracture. Pleasant chord progression. It's a really fascinating mix. It's great use of Foley with the cicadas and stuff. Five, four. Okay. All right. Hang on, can I? Alright. Fracture. Album mix. We're going to talk about it more in the conclusion. Because welcome to the conclusion of my review of this track from an act named Tour 13 titled Fracture, the album mix off of what I can presume to be the album titled Foria. In this section, I'm going to provide an overall song analysis of everything from lyrics and vocals all the way through to studio production, as well as any applicable constructive critique, and then finally my general thoughts from a listener's perspective. I should note before we go any further that I gave the song an overall score of 7.3 out of 10 based on the various musical criteria down below, so if you want to check that out, feel free to do so. But first, before we go any further, what do we think this song is about? If I'm honest with you, on a first listen basis, I was kind of trying to absorb everything, and I'm not entirely sure, but what I would gather is they've been going through a vehemently violent struggle, given the angst and just the struggle and strain in the early parts there with the way that the guitars sound, with the vocals, the way they are expressed. I didn't quite get those words clearly, but the moment we just scream, "It was you," with that distortion and bit crushing on it, you kind of get the feeling, okay, this is more of a reference of it being about someone, and this is more of a visceral, kind of brutal way of expressing that more than anything else. I feel like this is maybe a raw interpretation of our feelings about a certain person put into musical format. Maybe there is some ambient stuff that occurred outside. Maybe it's the nighttime sounds that you have there listening through it. I'm not sure, but like outside of that, I think vocally this track is more sort of artistic than trying to provide a really sort of clean sort of like clear vocal performance. I think it's very much focused on being outwardly expressive of our mood and intent and what we're going through, as opposed to telling a story. And I dig that. I think that's sincerely a really cool way of approaching things with vocals. I think that if you can emote in a way where the listener can kind of figure stuff out, even with a minimalist amount of narrative involved, you're good. And if the music kind of backs that up throughout the journey you have through it, that's really good. So yeah, I think, again, and just the screen that we had at the end, it's very theatrical, but not in a way where I feel that it's overdone. The track itself at 2 minutes 51 is well fleshed out with a variety of different ingredients. They're structurally fascinating as a through composed piece. The performance itself is stellar. You know, you do go through a big journey with these guys, even within the 2 minutes 51. There's definitely no filler. It's more different sounds, tones, and textures and how you sort of appreciate and interpret them. You do come in with a typically very kind of early 90s grunge-ish tone to those rotary reverbed guitars there, and I think that works really neatly. It kind of sets the mood immediately for the kind of music you might be listening to. That's just how distinctive that sort of tone of guitar is nowadays. What I kind of am more surprised by is just how much the guitars, like, they suffocate the drums, and that's not something I'm used to. You have those cymbal shimmers and stuff around the early point of it, but when those distorted guitars get double tracked on the sides there, it's just voracious. It's just gone. It's the most kind of intense, kind of overwhelming experience I've had when that, and I know that sounds like a lot, but I'm being genuine. I've never heard that before. It's just so unrelenting in how much it wants to crush them. But the drums have presence otherwise, and the leveling in a lot of the other parts of the track is really good. Overall, it's compressed and sort of like filtered quite well, so it's definitely a deliberate decision. The drums have this graininess to them there. We're really proficient on the kit. We play some nice sort of flourishes on the hi-hats there, the kicks and snares and the tom fills, etc. We're very comfortable not only playing at a set tempo, I think, but also switching up tempos. Like we start to accelerando a little bit near the end of the piece there, get a bit quicker in a way that's quite organic, and you feel like you're going through an emotional roller coaster. But then the drums are just not there at all, for example, around the 50-second mark. And they come back in, to be fair though, but it's just the kind of dustiness to the snare zone. It sounds so rugged and dusty and gritty. It's unconventional. I haven't really heard that tone of drum before. There are some sounds within this record that I haven't heard before, and I've reviewed like thousands of songs at this point. It's just unabashedly and unashamedly filthy sounding. And then we get these guitars coming back in after these 16th note sort of snare and fill transitions, kind of taking a break and coming back in, with the vocals oscillating over top in a very sort of trippy, kind of like uncertain way. And you then eventually get to a point around the halfway point where you just have cicadas and ambient foley, and you've got the drums as well. And you're just kind of trying to figure it out, and amongst the guitar lines in the mid-range there that kind of glow over top of it, it's almost kind of very spooky sounding, like you're listening to a horror soundtrack. Of course, when after the drums speed up, you've got that big scream from the vocalist, so it makes sense that things kind of increase in intensity and then they kind of smack down again. I can get behind that for sure. And like the way the guitars move to the side, and I think maybe the drums continue like that. The guitars are deliberately louder to kind of, again, be claustrophobic in a certain extent. But the fact you've just got moments of feedback, some nodes kind of overlaying each other, it's just a really surreal experience with an album that clearly knows what identity it wants to have, but it's unforgiving for people who are wanting something a bit more sort of typical to what they might be used to based off of the opening guitar tone. Just the kind of the distortion and grit and crushing of it. It's a track that is confrontational, but nonetheless very interesting to listen to. The guitars are colorful on the way they approach the single course drums with the rotary parts, moving into the distortion, they're feral with the power chords, moving into those mid to lead lines there for a bit of kind of surrealist interpretation with subleads. But then like we have some kind of ambient guitar or like atmospheric guitar parts in the background there, like with heavy reverb tails, whilst the drums are doing this funny sort of tippy tap parts with the 16th and the 32nd lines there, and they get quicker and quicker. And I think the bass in there, if I'm not mistaken, the bass is pretty full on as well, but it's relatively subtle in comparison to the guitars, for example. Ultimately though, you just have a wide variety of different guitar riffs and ideas there, and I kind of dig the variety and diversity within a track that is this short. It does not overstay its welcome, and I appreciate that we're trying to not feel boxed in, or that we don't feel boxed in by it. That we have a sense of compositional dynamic range there. For example, when the drums move away at the 50-second mark, by that we kind of push things. It's minor oriented. You know, thematically, even though it is minor oriented, it still has some extensions there and some sweet sounding chords there where it doesn't sound like it's got too much malice or it's associated. A lot of the kind of hint at things really being messed up is that guitar earlier on, but after that chill part, you have that crescendo and then boom, the vocals remind you of the situation they're going through. So ultimately, I think it's more like a fever dream of various elements that are put together with slick transitions, and at the end you feel like you've got a kind of summation of how things are fractured, and the track itself kind of sounds fractured, not from a lack of understanding or awareness from a musical theory and production perspective or performance perspective, but primarily because it's how it's tried to be put together again. Studio recording, mixing and mastering, it's rough, but like in a way where it's deliberate. Like initially when I heard how those guitars were overwhelming the bass, I was like, oh, the drums should I say, I was like, is this going to be kind of a raw experience? But then I heard the Foley come in, come to the ambient elements, and I was like, no, this is clearly deliberate. They're clearly trying to do specific things here and be more intentional with the way they're kind of making things a bit ugly or uncomfortable or overwhelming. And so I've got no issues with it, really. I mean, it's just simply a track which has the stuff surrounding you in the stereo field, you know, the music surrounds you in the headphones. There are some resonances in the frequency spectrum there, but like they're not ones that are kind of repellent. There's interesting use of vocal production, like again, the reverbs and the choruses and distortion delays, etc. Like in that last part, the guitars go through a variety of tones, but they're typically recorded effectively, albeit quite noisily. And the drums just have this kind of very distinct and original tone to them that is kind of as dusty as the track sounds. It's just kind of fascinating. So typically, you know, guitars, bass, drums, etc., ambient parts are recorded well, and ultimately, you know, bit of dynamic range, nice and loud, bit of pumping, burst, compression, limiting is handled. No applicable constructive critique, just as an isolated concept and a first impression, I think it works really well. And from a final general listener's perspective, I am thankful that I got the chance to review this primarily because it's encouraged and inspired me personally with some of the music that I make to try and make things that are a bit different than like completely leveled. Like it reminds me that it can be good to sort of like push some things a bit harder than others simply to create an aesthetic I want, and that it's totally okay to not kind of stay within a status quo, and that you can do lots of interesting things if you simply look at it a bit outside the box. Through Composed is dope. But thank you very much for watching my review of this track from an X-Name Tour 13 titled Fracture, the album mix off of what I think is the 4 album, if not mistaken. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you did, please go show them some love via the various social medias and Spotify page, and stay cool and stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as need the help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world. And I will catch you in the next SPRX. Spiderhands Out.